Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a deeply personal, kind of wild cognitive mystery. You know that feeling when you literally just had your keys and now they're completely gone? Well, that's not just you being scatterbrained. We're actually going to trace a massive shift in human history that went completely unnoticed for decades, and it's actively affecting your brain right now.
Let me ask you something, and be honest. Do you think you're smarter than your parents? What about your grandparents? For about 50 years, if you asked a cognitive scientist that question, the answer was a definitive, statistically proven yes. Every single generation was just reliably outperforming the last on intelligence tests. But recently, well, something shifted.
Which brings us to the first part of our mystery, the intelligence reversal. To really understand this reversal, we first have to look at something called the Flynn effect. Basically, this was the ironclad rule that from the 1930s all the way to the 1990s, global intelligence scores were just consistently going up. And this wasn't some random fluke, it was happening across every single country that tracked it. So on paper, a kid born in 1980 was measurably smarter than their parents. For half a century, the Flynn effect was one of the most rock-solid findings in all of cognitive science. But the really fascinating part is the timeline. The line kept going up and up until right around 1995. And then the music stopped. The trend completely reversed. And we're not talking about a tiny little dip here. Data collected from over 1 million people across 8 different countries confirmed this massive pivot. Scores were dropping so fast that researchers officially labeled the decline as alarming. So who or what is the culprit? Let's get into the Norwegian Brothers study. When this downward trend was first confirmed, people obviously scrambled for answers. And the theory that spread like wildfire was the dysgenics hypothesis. This was basically the idea that highly educated people were having fewer kids, while less educated folks were having more. So over generations, the math just works against average intelligence. It felt like comfortable, cold arithmetic, right? It carried this ring of scientific authority, and honestly, a lot of people bought into it completely. But then, in 2018, researchers published this absolute game-changer of a study out of Norway that totally destroyed the hypothesis. They tracked over 700,000 men. But here is the kicker. They didn't just look at random families. They specifically compared brothers. We're talking guys with the exact same DNA, raised by the same parents, eating at the exact same dinner table. And what they found was absolutely definitive. The younger brother consistently scored lower, meaning the decline had absolutely nothing to do with their DNA. I absolutely love the metaphor the researchers used to explain this. They said, it's like 2 plants from the exact same seed grown in the same pot, but one grew up with less light. The human seed, our genetics, didn't change at all, but the shared environment after 1975 definitely did. Something in the world shifted between the time the older brother grew up and when the younger brother came of age. Now, it's important to note that it wasn't every single cognitive skill that was falling. It was a very specific cluster. The skills dropping the fastest are abstract reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Collectively, scientists call this your executive function. Think of it like your brain's RAM. It's your ability to juggle multiple pieces of information and manipulate them under pressure. That is what's actively dropping right now. Okay, so what exactly stole the light? Let's look at the hidden environmental culprits. The data points us to 3 converging environmental forces that are quietly draining your executive function every single day. And I gotta warn you, it's a pretty bizarre lineup. We're looking at the attention economy, the quiet removal of iodine from commercial bread, and, get this, lead exposure from aviation fuel. Let's start with the attention economy. Just take a look at this number, 47 seconds. It's almost hard to believe. A massive 2023 study found something completely staggering. Back in 2004, the average time a person could focus on one screen without switching was 2.5 minutes. Today, because of constant app notifications and interruptions, that has plummeted to just 47 seconds. Literally, every platform you use is financially incentivized to break your focus. And here is why that is absolutely crushing your intelligence. Executive function isn't just locked in at birth. It builds like a muscle. And you know the specific exercise that builds that muscle? Boredom. Seriously. It's the cognitive state of sticking with something difficult when a much easier distraction is right there, like actually finishing a long, complex article instead of scrolling away. Because our modern world has made boredom structurally scarce, we literally aren't doing the heavy lifting needed to physically strengthen our working memory anymore. All right, moving on to the second culprit, which is sneaking right into your kitchen. For most of the 20th century, commercial bread was actually baked with iodized dough conditioners, and iodine is absolutely crucial for cognitive development. In fact, that original rise in IQ scores, the Flynn effect we talked about, tracked perfectly with better iodine availability. But in the 1970s and 80s, manufacturers quietly swapped it out for bromine-based alternatives. No big announcement, no public warning. Iodine deficiency silently made a comeback, causing widespread, measurable IQ drops, especially in developing minds. And the final piece of our environmental puzzle is chemical exposure, specifically lead in aviation fuel, which incredibly was used all the way up until 1996. Researchers have documented measurable cognitive losses across entire birth cohorts of kids who just happened to grow up near small airports. So you combine a fractured attention span, poor nutrition, and chemical exposure, and you can see exactly why our scores are being pulled down.
Now here is where things get a little bit spooky. Let's look at the AI convergence.
Because those three environmental factors alone don't explain the entire picture. There is this chilling twist in the data when you zoom out. The exact human skills that are falling the fastest, focus, fluid reasoning, thinking under pressure, are the hardest cognitive skills humanity ever developed. And uncanny enough, those are the exact specific skills that artificial intelligence systems have been improving at the fastest since 2015. We've been tracking human intelligence since the 1930s and AI intelligence since around 2015. And when researchers overlay that data on a graph, there's nothing subtle about it. One line goes down, one line goes up. Now, sure, these tests measure slightly different things in humans versus machines, but even cognitive scientists admit that this exact overlap, heading to the exact same place at the exact same time, is probably not a coincidence. Okay, take a deep breath. Section 5, reversing the trend. Before you feel totally defeated by the machines, let's get to the incredibly empowering news hidden in all this alarming data. Here is the absolute biggest takeaway from this entire explainer. The reverse Flynn effect is entirely environmental. It is not written into your genetics, and far more importantly, it is not permanent. Since this decline is driven by the world around us, the constant interruptions on our screens, our nutrition, our daily habits, we actually have the power to change our conditions and reverse it. Those Norwegian brothers proved that the only variable was the world they lived in. That means the line on that graph is not set in stone, which leaves us with this final, vital question. Will you be part of the trend or part of the answer? You know, we are in one of the only generations in history with the data to literally see this cognitive decline happening in real time. The window to fix it is wide open right now. So here's my challenge to you. Consciously step away from the constant digital noise. Give yourself permission to be bored. Rebuild that cognitive muscle before the window closes. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and reclaim your focus.